Welcome to today's webinar, Managing Finances When You Own Your Own Home but Have Little in Savings. And I'm delighted today our presenter is Nicola Beswick and I'm your facilitator, Nicola Graham. So you've got the two Nicolas today. So we like to start our programs with an acknowledgement. So we acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians past and present on whose lands we meet today. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to country and respect the cultural authority of the elders in each community. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce you today to our presenter, Nicola Deswick. So Nicola is a financial advisor, mentor and confidant, and she empowers people to create a financially certain future free from stress and uncertainty. And just a little bit of further background on Nicola. Nicola studied science at the University of Otago, realised she needed to swap the lab coat for a career that involved some more human interaction, and she moved into intellectual property and became a patent attorney. And Nicola's father was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when he was 55. And so Nicola again reevaluated her career and the contribution she could make to the greater good. And the experience with her father's diagnosis really highlighted the importance of financial education. So Nicola moved from her legal career to become a financial planner. In mid-2019, Nicola became involved as an advisor in the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network, PFAN, and this PFAN provides advice to individuals who've experienced a health crisis, and she was subsequently elected as director of PFAN in late 2019. Today, you can see all Nicola's qualifications there. She's also studying for a Masters of Financial Planning, and today Nicola works with all clients in a range of situations and circumstances and portfolio sizes to ensure they're working towards a life they deserve and they desire. So I'm now going to hand you over to Nicola.
Hi everyone, and lovely to be here. Nicola and I are doing our first live webinar in the same room. It's been a long time coming, and it is great to actually sit here and meet the team a little bit more. Now today we're going to talk about taking control of your finances when you have your own home but have little in savings. This is one of 5 different case studies that we've looked at, and we'll get through that a little bit further. So I'm here on behalf of the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network, and our mission is to connect the financial advisors who want to provide pro bono advice to people who are going through a financial hardship and support those particularly going through a health crisis. So we do a lot of work through the Multiple Sclerosis Limited, and not only here in Victoria but around Australia. And it really is to help improve people's peace of mind and financial security in such a tough time. Nicola's already introduced me, and this is my official qualifications and place that I work. So I'm an advisor through FMD Financial, and a professional practice that is aligned with the Financial Planning Association of Australia. As you probably know, I have to put in this lovely general advice disclaimer, which really talks about today's situation. I'm going to talk about a fictitious couple and how a fictitious advisor helped them arrive at a situation. Please, if there is anything that you think may be suitable for you, when we talk about the situation, please don't do this yourself. Please get some advice. Contact us through the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network, and we'll be able to put you in touch with an advisor to assist and provide you with advice that is suitable for your specific situations. As Nicola said, the reason I became a financial planner is because of my dad. This is a picture of him and myself a couple of years ago, and he was diagnosed with MS at the age of 55 and lost essentially it started with the loss of his right side, and he's the reason why I chose a little bit of a career change, and is one of the best decisions that I've made in my life. So we're going to talk a little bit about how financial planners can help and what the typical life cycle is from a financial planning perspective as our situations change. But we know that life is not straightforward, and we're going to focus on a couple, Kitty and Richard, who were a scenario that came through MS Connect, and how a financial planner helped both of them. Now, the names and the situations are similar, but it is very different from what the advice was in terms of the specifics there. So financial planners, we can help in a number of ways. The main focus that we do is look at someone's financial situation and their goals and objectives, and bring where they are now to where they want to be together. We look at things like debt management, cash flow, tax planning, investment planning, but there are some things that financial advisors or planners don't do, and estate planning, for example, getting advice from estate planning legal professionals and also financial counsellors where you have particular issues with regards to debts and so forth. They're a very big and very important piece of the equation when looking at someone's financial affairs. When someone comes to us from a financial planning perspective, there's a general consensus of the way that we look at things. In our early years, it's about basic wealth protection, making sure that we've got everything in order for as we enter into the workforce and our lives change. As we get a little bit older and we're working full time and raising a family, it's about accumulating wealth and also making sure we've got the right protection in place for when we retire and actually enjoy the time that we have. That's when we start to draw down on that wealth that we've accumulated and worked so hard to put aside for our future. But we know that life is not completely straightforward like that, and it can take an unexpected turn sometimes. These are a couple of examples that we have explored in terms of people who have come through from MS Connect and scenarios that they've found themselves in at various stages of this life cycle that I've got there, and how an MS diagnosis has impacted them and their family. Today, we're going to focus on Richard and Kitty. In the previous webinars, we've talked through the different scenarios of Mike, Mary, Debbie, and John, and how a financial advisor helped them. But today, with Kitty and Richard, it's about them being an older couple, living in their own home, and not necessarily having that much in savings. This is we see it quite a bit in terms of people being asset rich and cash flow poor, and they know that they're trying to work out what they need to do to generate extra cash flow and have income to live on. And as you can see there, one of the key things that they said to their advisor was, should we rent out our property and live elsewhere? Because we live in quite a large place. We have our own home, but no other major assets. So when we look at Richard and Kitty, not John, they're 72 and 75 years of age, retired, and have income from the age pension. There's no liabilities or debt. They own their own home in Blackburn, which is about $1.4 million, and don't really have any other financial assets. So the key points that their advisor looked through was, firstly, cash flow management, particularly Centrelink, assessing their assets, which is essentially their home, and exploring the options of either downsizing and renting, or renting. There's a range of different aspects there, and also personal risk insurances. I know this is something that may apply to some people, not a consideration here for these two, given their status in terms of their age and it being something that's very difficult to achieve, as well as other considerations that the advisor may have for Kitty and Richard. So the first thing we know is cash flow is really important for people. We know that they have a small amount of cash in the bank and no debt. That's great. But really the income that they have was primarily the age pension. Now, based on the situation, they were entitled to receive the full age pension, both of them, and that gave them $37,000 per annum each. Now, that's based on the current criteria at the moment for the age pension. Now, that may seem like a nice amount to some, maybe not a nice amount to others. Everyone's needs from an income and expenses are different, and it's one thing that we use for and when we were looking at people's situation is the retirement standards that get put out from the superannuation research that is done, and this helps us look at what people in different types of couples arrangements, so couples and singles, and whether they can have a nice lifestyle, so that's termed a comfortable lifestyle, or a modest lifestyle. And we can see the modest lifestyle for a couple is a little bit more than what Kitty and Richard are getting from the full age pension, which was about the $37,000 a year. So there is a little bit of a gap there, and that's probably one of the most important things that they're realising at the moment is how do we make up that shortfall in terms of the difference of what income they're getting and what income they need to meet just their general day-to-day living expenses. So we know one of the big things that was part of their situation was their home. We know that they had a really large home that they didn't need anymore because the family had grown up and left. And so they thought about the option of renting out their home and moving to another place which was smaller and renting that. Now, one of the key things with this situation was the income that they were going to get from renting out their home wasn't going to be enough to increase their overall level of income. Even though Centrelink would get some rent assist through them renting out their own home, it didn't fill that gap in terms of increasing their income. Also, with this scenario, there were issues around tenants, for those that may have had rental properties in the past, and I'm not saying all tenants are like this, that there could potentially be issues with people if they don't have a great relationship between landlord and tenants. And finally, I think one of the most important things was Kitty wasn't really happy about having someone else living in her family home, particularly with the emotion that goes with living in that place. So it was a bit of a when the option with this was presented, it didn't seem to be the viable option. They did look at some other aspects of how they could get extra money. There are things such as reverse mortgages out there, which does give some free cash or some additional cash to draw on to meet the living expenses without needing to move. But this can impact what the estate, so when both people pass away and the house gets sold, what that estate is left with. And this is because the way that these facilities are structured is that a lump sum is attached to the home, and even though interest is not payable, it compounds on the amount that is secured against the home. So it can look attractive, but doesn't necessarily end up being a lot. Plus, Centrelink ended up being impacted because any amount that's taken out can be counted as an asset after that first 90 days. So this scenario was discounted because of the impacts, particularly from the compounding of the interest and the amount that they would eventually get to secure on their home. So the other option that they looked at with their advisor is changing residences. They explored two options. The first one to present to sell their current home and look at buying a new house where they could essentially downsize, or purchase a unit in a retirement village with an aged care facility attached. And we know that that can be quite important, particularly if you don't want to move again and health issues become more and more important to manage. So these are the two options that they had with downsizing, and essentially the whole aspect with that was to free up some extra capital attached within their home. So they went down the retirement village route, and these were a couple of the key areas that are important to look at and their advisor looked at. So starting the process early and getting a third party, so for example a family member, looking at the social security impacts and what happens when you leave the retirement village, because particularly at the moment, and this ties in with the 0.5 there around the monthly fee, is each contract attached to a retirement village is different. Some facilities you pay a lump sum, and when you leave they take 30% of the capital that you've paid. Some you have to pay a monthly fee, like a body corporate fee. So every facility is different and every contract is different. And so that's very important when looking at this aspect of entering into a retirement village. Don't buy before you've sold, because this is very important with knowing what you've got to purchase and how much you can have from a capital perspective. But also don't look at discounting staying put, and don't sign a contract. I think this is probably the most important one. Don't sign a contract until you've got advice on what that contract means and what's important. So Kitty and Richard went down the decision of selling and purchasing a retirement village. And this is the one that they looked at.
It's very nice.
It is very nice. Yes.
Not like the image I have of retirement villages.
So they didn't want to move too far away. So they went to a place in Blackburn as well, and picked a nice 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom place. And you can see that the price estimate here was just under $900,000. So when we look at what they could sell their place for, so 1.4 million, take away around 2% of the sale price for costs and so forth. Net proceeds about 1.37 million, and then the costs of purchasing and the moving costs gave them $467,000 to purchase or have as additional funds sitting there. So that was a nice way that they found in terms of being able to free up their the capital that was attached to their house. And I know Kitty may have not been happy with the move, but she was very also aware of what needed to happen in terms of making sure that they had money left over to help with their lifestyle for the next number of years. Now, I've talked about Centrelink quite a lot in previous webinars, and one key thing that we needed to look at is not only did they have that money or that equity released from the downsizing of their home, but the impact to Centrelink. And we know that Centrelink looks at a couple of tests, so income and assets test being particularly important. And the amount that they could potentially get would be, for a couple, they were getting the full amount, so the 18,000 per annum each, and this included those supplements. So that was what they were getting, but we knew that based on what they may have been receiving now with those assets tests, that amount would reduce a little bit. So the key thing for us to look at for getting the full pension is how much of an asset do they have, and we know if we look just at the amount that they had left over, which was the $467,000, they were over that full age pension part for a couple home. Now I've assumed that they're a homeowner. Particularly because retirement villages can get complicated from a homeowner or a non-homeowner perspective. So discounted that complexity here, and that's probably one thing that if you are looking at doing this is important from an advice perspective, to make sure that you've got all the facts in front of you before you make a decision. The other test that we mentioned was the income test, and that is based on a set threshold as well, depending on how much of a notional amount of income is deemed to be received. And currently for the income test, it's based on what we call a deemed amount, which is a set rate of return that money in the bank or certain assets will receive. So that can be for a couple to get the full pension, $8,216 is the amount of income per year to get the full pension, and that goes up for the part pension to $82,000. Now, income from an accessible perspective is different depending on what assets someone has. So cash in the bank is deemed to earn a set rate of return depending on their situation. So putting this into the equation from where they were before to after, we can see that the capital left over from the sale of the home and downsizing had impacted some of their annual pension. So we went to getting the full amount of age pension, which is in that 4 column of $18,500 each per annum, down to $14,800 per annum each, and that is because the total assets that they now have is over that lower threshold that you can have to get the full age pension. So one of the key things now is, before they were really just relying on Centrelink's income, and also making sure that they had extra money. The Centrelink has obviously decreased, but they also could generate, if they had the cash left over, they could put it in the bank and have it earn a small rate of return. You know, money in the bank at the moment from a cash perspective isn't that high. I've assumed 1%, which is probably very generous at this point in time. So that does help increase the level of income that they get in that middle column from an after perspective. But if they went one step further with their the money that they left over and invested it in a conservative way, they could increase the level of income from the portfolio and help that with the time frame that residual money left over. So this is taking that money and comparing what you do from realising that capital, keeping it in cash in the bank or a high interest savings account, to then looking at how do you structure the asset base in a way to maximise the return a little bit more over and above what you're getting from income, but not necessarily being too aggressive. And that's probably the next part of the equation, is making sure that you don't take on too many risks. And this is where the concept of diversification becomes really important. We know that we don't want to necessarily have too much risk, or putting all your eggs in one basket, particularly because for Richard and Kitty, making sure that having these funds last for their lifetime is really important, because they don't want to move again. So risk and return is very much dependent on how you're invested from a conservative to an aggressive way, and you can structure investments in a particular way depending on how much risk you want to take. And for Richard and Kitty, what we looked at is something with what we call a moderate investment portfolio. So conservatively invested with the majority of money in fixed income assets, a little bit in the equity perspective, because we want to make sure that there is some growth there. So that's shares, property and so forth. With fixed income is looking at things like bonds, other type of instruments that you can have that are over and above cash and term deposits. So that helped with making sure that they could get a little bit extra income, very similar to what I showed you in the previous slide. And this is how the longevity of their capital lasted. So the blue line there shows by investing the money in a portfolio, and coupled with that Centrelink, that you can have the funds last a little bit longer, as opposed to having money just left in the bank and the funds can, you draw down on them quite aggressively, and that can shorten the time span there. So I'm hoping that gives you a little bit of a sense in terms of what could be done in that situation. One of the key things here is that income, particularly as we, at any stage, income is important, and as we get older and retire and rely on our wealth, it's about managing where you draw down your income from, and structuring a portfolio to make sure that it meets with your objectives and what you want to achieve. And particularly with Richard and Kitty's example, they wanted to make sure that they have some security, but also a little bit higher level of income. So that is important from that objective, but also management of risk, particularly in the investment space. Other considerations that are very important is essentially ensuring that wills, power of attorneys, medical and health directives are up to date. We want to make sure that they, as life changes, that these affairs are put in place, and particularly with Richard and Kitty's situation where they've moved from their own home into a retirement village, that they've got that taken care of as well. So as you can see in this scenario, and also the other scenarios that we've talked about over the last number of months, maybe a year or so, that financial advice can and does help people in every situation. Everyone's different. There are so many complexities and nuances with people that it is really important that particularly you seek advice before you do something. One of the key things that I really want to highlight through this is this scenario and the other webinars that we've talked about are scenarios unique to those people, and we are here, the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network is here to help match you up with advisors who want to assist. So please get in contact, because we are wanting to make sure that you can maximise your situation. Some tips that I think before I finish off that are important is have a look at your savings and make sure that you know where you're sitting. Plan for your potential future and what may or may be important for you. And I know that we've talked a bit about an older couple today, but if you're younger and you have superannuation, looking at your TPD, your income protection insurance, that's through the superannuation, that's also an important factor as well. And these are the contact details that I have for you today in order to get in touch with us through the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network. Our website is there, as well as our direct contact number, emails. We've got a form that you can access online, and that gives you the information that you just fill in and send through to us, and we'll put you in touch with someone. I hope you've enjoyed today's session. Very different to the last one, but yeah, hopefully it's given you all out there something to think about.
Thank you so much, Nicola. It makes me realise how financially illiterate I've been. It's very silly questions.
No. No.
So just, you know, it's really interesting about home equity loans and reverse mortgage loans, and how often we hear people on MS Connect talk about that, and
yeah,
you know, how you were able to put across some of the real disadvantages there. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I thought particularly what we do as financial advisors is not just look at the solution, but look at the alternatives and discount why they're not maybe important for someone and their situation, and particularly reverse mortgages are one of those key things where it does come up quite often, and people don't necessarily realise the potential ongoing impacts that could have on their future. So it's important to be aware of them.
And in Kitty's example, there's a real emotional component, but when you look at the cold hard figures on the sheet, it helps you to get over the line, doesn't it, in terms of what's going to be a smart move for you.
Exactly.
I think that's you do that really well in terms of, and that's your job, isn't it, to analyse the figures and work out exactly what the bottom line is going to be.
Yep.
Okay, so thank you very much, Nicola. I'm just going to ask and see if there's any questions. I haven't got any questions at the moment, but if anybody does have any questions, please take an opportunity now to type them in. Meanwhile, I'll just run through our housekeeping slides whilst you have a chance to type in any questions. So obviously our MS Connect 9 line 1800 042 138 and our email there. Some good reasons why you might call MS Connect, so information about treatment, support for people who are newly diagnosed, expert advice on managing symptoms. It's the gateway to all of our services, whether that's peer support, employment support, education, NDIS, etc. So we have got some wonderful peer support available in different varieties, so phone, face-to-face, telegroups, Facebook groups. We have a symptom management tool called Get Your Act Together, which is on our website. We have nationwide employment support services for people who may be in work, but also those people who might be seeking new employment. We are an NDIS provider, different services in different states. And just some information for people who might be interested in My Aged Care and some contact details on their websites. We've got a great series of podcasts that you can listen to, and we're up to about episode 21 now, so there's a huge range of subjects there. And again, our MS Connect details. Now I'm just going to have a quick look now at our questions that have come in, so just bear with me a moment. So there's a thank you, and Debbie's asking a good question here if she can watch the previous webinars with the different scenarios that Nicola talked about today. And yes, you can. Those recordings are available in the webinar library, and you can have a look at all those different scenarios. So Nicola, I think you've covered everything. Nobody's got any questions. If you do think of anything later, feel free to email me and I will pass that on. So you can email msconnect@ms.org.au or education@ms.org.au. And people are saying thanks. So Antonia says thanks, and Gail. And so that's lovely. Thank you very much for your time today, everybody. And thanks again to our presenter, Nicola. Oh, sorry, and Karen's got a question. So I'll read this out. If you want to stay and listen, that's great. And so Karen's saying, hi, Nicola, we're in our 50s and paying down the mortgage as our focus. I'm wondering if this is a good plan. We're planning to clear it while interest rates are low.
One thing I'll say is when you go into retirement is you want to make sure that your expenses are lower than what your income's coming in. And so particularly with interest rates being low now, it's an ideal way to carry on putting money into a loan and getting more return in terms of paying down the principal and not paying as much interest. So certainly by maximising repayments, it's going to obviously shorten the time frame on your loan and pay less interest. So in a way, without knowing more about your situation, it's an ideal time for everyone to pay down any debt that they have and what they want to work towards in the future. So I hope that answers your question in terms of making sure that's a little bit of information there.
It's hard to be specific until you've got all the details.
It is.
But it's a general rule of thumb. So yeah, lots of thanks, and we'll close the webinar now and look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Thank you, everybody.